Guys, do you ever just hate a reg when you're playing online poker? Like for no reason, you don't even know who they are in real life, but you just hate them. It's that screen name with the semicolon in the middle of the name, like for no reason, these uppercase letters in the middle of the word. The avatar is like something really trippy, like kaleidoscopic cats waving, and every time you look at it, you're like, oh. They use really obnoxious bet sizing, like 7.13 big blinds. You just want to take every last resource that they have. You want to ruin them. Do you ever feel like that? Is it just me? Is it just me? Let's get to the video. This is how we think about preflop. This hand has a certain EV to call, in theory. It's either winning, or it's losing, or it's break even. But this is a really gradable thing, so it might be losing a lot, or it might be losing a little bit. And knowing the EV of calling here in game theory is essential to deciding what to do in game. I have a chart here for facing a 2.5x open, and it looks like this. And what we can see by looking at this is that the EV for calling this hand is losing 6% of the big blind if villain raises 2.5x. That's the EV for 6-5 off. So the big mistake I see people make when they're working on the preflop game is that they assume that any hand out with this green belt of calling hands here, big blind against under the gun, is just wrong, and any hand within it is just right. So there's a lot of this binary thinking where people say, this is not a thing. It's not a thing. This is like one of my most hated pet peeves of 21st century poker. Not a thing. But like, there's a big difference between Jack 4 off, which is really not a thing. That's losing almost half a big blind to call, and 6-5 off, which is losing just a little bit. So if you look at those hands and you're just seeing them as similar because they're both in the gray zone there against 2.5x, that's a really flawed way of looking at the game. So just make sure that you're always understanding that there is an EV associated with a play in theory. I'd highly encourage you to get away from range charts and start looking at the actual baseline EV in some kind of program that displays it, and stop just trying to memorize this green shape here, because you can memorize that against 2.5, but then you face 2.25 and, you know, everything changes. So I think in the real world here, the baseline EV of this defend is going to be winning because the 4 of hearts came. The flop was simply the 4 of hearts, and whenever the flop is just the 4 of hearts, you have a 3-card straight, and that's like one of the best hands you can have when there's only 3 cards. We're playing one community card hold'em here. But no, I paused the video at a humorous time, or maybe not, depending on your humor. But the reason you should probably call pre there is that the open is smaller, and I get a bit arrogant when I play in a pool like this. Make no mistake, I'm grinding this challenge, not to prove that I can beat 100 Russian cash, but to prove that I can absolutely annihilate it. That's what I'm trying to do. We don't have really any reason to suspect that we can't swing 6% of a big blind from villain sizing being smaller and from hopefully having a skill edge against basically, I don't want to say like everybody, so I don't know if there's like some crushers hiding in this pool, but the vast majority of people. So we go ahead and make this call. Does that mean that you should make this call? Probably if villain is min opening, or you're playing in a low rake environment, or something is different, or you think you've got an edge, or villain is a weaker player. You know, you guys might not be at a level where you think you have a giant edge on the whole pool, but you might think that you've got an edge on, you know, large parts of it, or at least the recreational side of it, or that sort of thing. So anyway, we go for small donk here. I think I've said this before in videos that on these low paired boards, there's a lot of check back happening if we don't build a donk bet range. So one way to thwart that is just to build a donk bet range. Of course, if we think people are c-betting too much, which they are, we could just go for check raise here instead. But yeah, we decide to go for 2x pot on turn. This is a really logical play. This isn't just me being a caveman and, you know, taking out a giant club and smashing the keyboard with it. Well, it is kind of that. But it's also congruent with my value range. So what I'm really saying I have here is pocket 8s, 4 deuce, 4x, pocket deuces, boats and trips. That's like the value region that goes 2x pot here. Not pocket 9s or pocket 10s. That's no longer what I'm saying I have. If I use like a B70 here, I can say that I have 9s or 10s or jacks. That's completely coherent. So you can have a few different sizes here. You could build 3 sizes in a spot if you wanted. No, you don't have to balance them exactly. You just want to be aware that you have them. So you could put like your 8-7 into your block bet range here. You could put your pocket jacks into your B66 range here. You could put trips into your 2x pot range here. But when I am overbetting, and this is a double gutter by the way, guys, this is a sneaky one. Sometimes poker pulls the wool over our eyes and makes us think we only have 1 gutter, but in fact we have 2. You know, going for the giant sizes with the nutty implied odds drawing hands is going to be the main choice in theory. It's also going to just be really good in practice because it's going to scare the living hell out of your opponents. If they call you here and you do decide to bluff the river, which, you know, with a combo like this, you will do sometimes, you're blocking 5-4 of spades. So even if you do block ace-5 of spades that folds river, you're also blocking like a nutted hand here. You're not blocking a 4 with the 6 of hearts, but you have the kind of hand that's just going to jam the river. So one way we're actually playing this spot is we're betting here, the turn's becoming 40 bigs, and then we're 2x potting the river. So this is actually a 2e sizing. When people say 2E, 3E, 1E, they mean smoothly getting the money in over that number of streets. So this is a 2E sizing. This is exactly the sizing you should be taking with your big hands here. I would go as far to say that like 1.2x pot is too small for your smallest overbet. Like I don't think that should be your overbet size, I think, or for your biggest overbet. I think it should be a giant one. So we go for this, and if called, we're going to be playing some river jam here probably. We can also give up at some frequency. It's quite hard to avoid overbluffing certain rivers. You know, if the river is like a king, it's a total brick for us. It's really hard to avoid overbluffing. Whereas if the river is a 3 or something, obviously we make the nuts with this hand, but on a 3 river, we're just going to have way more chance of being able to have more value hands in our range and therefore follow through with more of our bluffs on that advantageous river. The 8 river would be another one that's very, very difficult to say you have anything on because your pocket 8s has been diminished. Villain's range has just been bolstered by this card. Sometimes villain has made the uber boat because like they have an 8 and we don't when we use that turn sizing. So this would be a river we have to just theoretically give up on. Very often play a super high check frequency on, but yeah, it's an interesting spot. Okay, let's move on to more reg battles. Try not to level yourselves too hard when the pot odds are good. Like some weaker regs do this a lot, and it really bugs me when my students make folds like on the river here. I didn't fold this river, but I've seen my students fold this river and I really hate it. So this is something we talk about a lot in Cash Injection, which you can find over at carrotcorner.com. That's our quick fix exploitative course. It gives you 10 pool breaking exploits for you to apply. And it's about playing against unfiltered ranges. So you'll note here that from the get-go, we have this guy tagged blue, which means he's done something in the past that marks him as recreational, perhaps. That could be wrong, but that's the tag we have. And when we check the flop here, small blind versus big blind, we have not caused one iota of filtering in the opponent's range. So that's to say that the opponent still has all of the combos of king 8 offsuit or king 9 offsuit or whatever. They're not 3-betting as a bluff pre. So they just have tons and tons of rubbish hands. When the board runs out like this and they've checked back turn, they're not really going to have many hands that can thin value bet this river. Because if you think about it, when I check this river to villain, if they have a 10 or better, I think the default thing for them to do is just going to be to bet bigger. So I think I did actually opt to check here. And I think this is exploitative. I think in theory you can definitely block bet, but I figured people bet the flop way too wide and out of control. And what that does is it leads to their landing range. That's the range to get to this street with, just being completely out of control. And so if you think about them having just rivered king 10 or ace 10 or jack 10 or something, like they're going to bet bigger normally. Like I don't think they're going to bet tiny very often. If they have a hand like 7s or ace 6, I think they're very often going to bet the turn. So like what exactly is the block bet range here? Is it a flush? Are they betting small to induce? Don't put really specific ideas in your opponent's heads like that, guys. That's not how poker works. You're dealing with a large pool of people that people have arrived here with, I'm just going to go with it, with a really wide base range. We call that the landing range. It's out of control. And in that Cash Injection episode, I show you tons of other examples like this where you can just really exploit by giving some rope to these capped ranges and then just bluff catching. I put up a tweet the other day that Twitter didn't really like for some reason. It kind of suppressed it a bit. I'm not really sure why, or just not that many people saw it or liked it. But I thought the tweet was quite a good idea. I think it was a bit convoluted, but it was something to the effect of, if you are someone that can't handle being outdrawn, then you probably miss a lot of value against overbluffing opponents with wide ranges. It was basically along those lines. So if I had got to the flop here and just said, oh man, I need to bet to protect my hand, I can't have king jack getting there, even though king jack calls my flop bet every time and then it just gets there in a bigger pot anyway. But if I have a thought process like that, then I never take advantage of this juicy exploit that's like should be at the heart of your game. Like if you're playing a game like 50 NL or 100 NL, you need to have these lines where you give rope to these out of control ranges and soft pools, and you need to take full advantage of that. So yeah, we need 20%. This is third pot? Is this third? No, this is third pot. We need 20% to call here. So when I look at this, I'm thinking, well, I think I win like more than half the time. Like sure, sometimes you'll just have like 6-5 and we'll just be making a good thin value bet. But most of the time, that hand's bet the turn. Or if villain has a flush or a 10, it's betting bigger. So yes, it could be like a nitty guy with 10-9 that thinks it's only worth this sizing, or it could be someone with pocket 5s that's going for a good thin value bet. But I'd say at least half the time here we just run into some absolute trash. And villain's whole gambit here is that regs are going to level themselves into thinking, I don't want to be milked, I don't want to be bluffed by this sizing. And I'll let you into another secret, guys. This bet here probably drastically overperforms. Like he's meant to get 20% fold equity. Wouldn't shock me if he got 30 with this against the average reg. Against me, he's getting nothing. Like I'm literally never ever folding anything in my range to this because I know it's overbluff. But in general, he could be getting 30%. Against me, he's getting 0, hard lines. That's the way it goes sometimes. If you run into an obese beast, you get eaten. That's how it goes. I just came up with that there. That wasn't a prepared line. But maybe that should be my whole persona with this screen name. What am I thinking about here? It's worrying that I didn't just call faster. Yeah, so like Queen 8 of Diamonds is just a typical hand that there's way too many cousin hands like that. Just hands that are going to play that way. So yeah, really important one. Keep the range wide, blind versus blind, and then bluff catch accordingly. This is another really cool exploitative spot. This is another exploit I like to use. I actually discovered this one more recently in my career. I never really used it in the past because I hated the name BSTI, bet small to induce. It kind of made me, I don't know, just despise the play. It was a really like dodgy acronym that I've never really liked. So sorry about that, Charlie, but here we are. But there's a lot of merit to this play. This is the sort of play that when you understand what's going on and you do it with the right type of hand, it's extremely powerful. But I think like if you teach this to a student, just say, oh yeah, just bet small to induce, they'll do it in all the wrong spots. So I think it's really important to understand when are you betting small and that it's not just to induce, that when you bet small like this, let's just recap the action here a second. So flop, we make a small c-bet, villain calls, we check the second pair on the turn, villain checks back. 4 on the river, you know, messes up the board in a few different ways. It makes 4x trips, it makes a flush possible, but villain's going to have very few flushes on this node after turn goes check, check in reality. So villain's range is like lots of ace high and king high and stuff like that still. There's going to be some pair of 7s. So the bet small to induce line, like I don't use that term because I'm not just betting small to induce. Like the term bet small to induce to me sounds too much like it's the sole purpose of the bet. Like that's not actually how I intend it. When I bet small on this river, what I'm really doing is I'm value betting. So I'm saying I'm going to bet 5th pot. And that is also a sizing that happens to induce. And that's a real bonus. And it's a real part of the meat and potatoes of why you bet here. But it's not the full meal. Like it's more of like the potatoes and one bit of veg. I'd say that's the induce element here. It's not like it's the whole like beef joint as well or whatever. Like the main purpose of this bet is just that you have 60 something percent equity with the jack here or whatever. And 5th pot is a fine value bet sizing. When you start with 60 something percent equity, you're still going to be a favorite when called. But yeah, in general, I don't think people have enough value bets here to build a raising range. The thing is that when a human gets the idea that they want to raise in their head here, any random airball, ace high, king high hand that they're holding can fit that bill, and then suddenly they're just over bluffing. So when I look at this, I just think this has to be a really winning call because there aren't that many value hands that support this sizing. So here's a quick note to the guy in the comments section from a few videos ago who was like, lol, 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 man tries to make reads and is wrong every time. So when you make a read, it's about somebody's range, right? It's not about their hand. So if you do run into like a flush here that just used the silly small sizing or like 4 or 5 or something like that, c'est la vie, that's fine. To call this bet, I need like not very much equity at all. I'm risking 6 to win a pot that's going to become, what is that, 26. So that's kind of ridiculous. I need like 24% equity to call here. I have more than 24% equity in it. That entails that I could lose 66% of the time or 70% of the time and still be making a really good call. So I say to that person in chat, you don't deserve to play the game, you should stop, but don't stop when I'm at your table, stop after that session. Back to this hand, what did villain have? The grand reveal, we're of course calling here. How wide did the bluffing range get? Did I get owned this time? Tune in next week to find out. No, I'm just kidding, we're gonna show you eminently. Right after this ad break, just kidding again, we're gonna show you right now, see? 6-5. That's an interesting hand. This would not be my first pick of what I thought villain was bluffing with here. I think this is like a reasonable bluff, by the way. Like if he's a GTO guy, he might be like, oh, I block their 5x of clubs, blah, like he might be doing that. Or he might just be like, screw this guy, I'm going to raise him. But this is a hand that many people will just bet on the turn every single time. So I'm kind of it's a bit unexpected to see this one. But yeah, definitely a very good spot to go 1/5 pot. We talked about block betting a few videos ago. If you're not using block bets, you really, really need to start. I promise you, it's a whole new world. It's a gold mine. I know, guys, a lot of you do use block bets. I know you're sitting there thinking, of course I use block bets. Pah, how dare you assume I don't? But there are people that honestly never use them. And if you're one of those people, put your hand up in the comments and be like, man, I never used block bets before. We get a lot of really lovely comments these days that say stuff like, my win rate's improved so much since I started watching this channel. I've been doing all these things. Be specific. What have you been doing? You know, have you incorporated block bets yet? And how's it been working? Have you done it in the right spots? Do you need some help with that? Let us know. Okay, this is the hand that really gave me the idea for this video because this is definitely a reg battle. Netrunner, I don't know much about them. I just know that they're a reg. They're playing high volume, doing reggy things and using good sizes like this. And they seem pretty good so far. They seem pretty solid. So definitely showing a little bit of respect to this opponent and just trying to play a bit more theoretically soundly or something like that. The pocket 8s here, the snowmans, you're just going to be flatting the 3-bet, right? 4-bet is a little bit loose with this hand, but against the right person it could be okay. But I'd say the default play is definitely to call. Easy call on the flop with a pair and the club here. The club is just improving the 8 outs a little bit. We've got some backdoor straight draws, albeit not very good ones. That's a nice turn. On this turn card, I figured that tiny block must be a thing in theory. The reason being that the 6 just improves the equity of the small blind range here pretty heavily. Meanwhile, it's missing the big blind, but it's not missing the big blind as much as it would if this was like small blind 3-better against hijack or something like that. So maybe here it's a little bit more neutral, but I still think it's a card that's very much in our favor. And when we bet really small here, my whole gambit is that people won't raise me enough in position. They'll just like be way too tempted to call. And I don't think that they're going to bluff raise me really at the frequency that they should. With 8s, I can obviously get peeled here by hands that I'm still doing well against. I can get called by pocket 7s, or I can get called by ace 5 or something like that, or I can get called by 2 big cards like king queen or king jack or queen jack, or maybe ace x with a club or something like that. So definitely loads of hands I can sort of quote unquote value bet against here. I'm also cleaning up a ton of equity, so if villain folds ace queen, I just protect against all the non-club overcards coming. So yeah, I think pocket 8s makes some sense as a tiny block here and just gives us some options going forward. We could maybe turn this into a bluff on certain rivers, but I don't really think so, actually. I think we just river quite well with this hand. We're either checking for showdown value or value betting on particular runouts. We also have the straight flush draw, which is pretty nice. So the river bricks off, and this is an interesting node where I don't think we have a value bet anymore. I think we've exhausted that on the turn. If we bet the river, I think we will be committing the dreaded polarization mistake. And like, see, when you're starting out in poker, guys, the main thing to avoid above all else, like the thing to make sure that you don't do, is betting the middle of your range. Betting a hand with medium equity that does well as a check, can't be bet as a clear value bet, and can't be bet as a clear bluff. If you're bypassing the primary functions of betting, i.e. value and bluffing, and you're actually betting with a thought like, I want to rep that I have, I don't want to face a bet, I want him to think that blah blah blah, if I check, this bad thing will happen and I'll feel bad. If you're betting for reasons like that, time to go back to the drawing board and make sure that, here's homework for you, every single bet you make from this point onwards on the turn or river can either be named a bluff or a value bet. It can be labeled one of those two things. There are some weird exceptions to do a bit of both, but leave that for now. That's called hybrid betting and that's a little bit more advanced. But in this spot, we don't really have a value bet for any sizing, because if I bet like, even if I bet 8 big blinds again or something like that, or I bet 5 big blinds, I mean, is that getting close to a value bet? Maybe it is. Like maybe 4 or 5 big blinds or something here. You can do that. You can build in like 1/10th pot or 1/11th of the pot or something like that. But I think the cleaner way to play here is just to check. Villain has got here with a few too many queen jack, king queen, ace of clubs X, just combos that don't really have any showdown value. Maybe even some bluffs like the king 8 offsuit with the king of clubs, or the jack 8 offsuit with the jack of clubs, or even without it. There's a bunch of air in this big blind range, because let's not forget the big blind 3-bet range is a lot more polar and air heavy than earlier positions would be, for good reason. Big blind can call a lot. So I think in this spot, just check calling is the default way to play. If villain has an overpair, fine, they're going to get a bunch of money here. Like if villain has, I don't know, kings or aces or something, and they find a pretty easy value bet actually on this river, then good for them. But at the same time, if villain has a flush, I think they're pretty often going to raise the turn. With a set, I think they're going to raise the turn a bit more. I just don't think they're going to have a ton of sets and flushes here. And I do have like some reasonable amount of blocker stuff going on to those hands. So I think overall, the blocker thing is, by the way, a very last consideration. It's really not in any way the straw that breaks the camel's back here. It's not a deal breaking factor. It's basically just a sort of additional thing to add at the end. But yeah, against the sizing, we're needing to win. You can just see I'm just like snapping here. I don't really care. There's just no way this can't be an overbluff spot, because again, the opponent's just arriving here with far too many air candidates. The board has not really helped them very much. And yeah, I think they're just lacking value bets here. The correct ratio of value to bluffs in that spot for villain is the same percentage that we need to win the pot at. So if you think about it, this is about, what, 2/3 of the pot? I'm just estimating here. Not even that. So we're probably requiring like 26-27% equity to make calling okay here. Let me know in the comments what the exact math is if you want. And I just think we win about half the time. Like I literally think we win like close to half the time here, maybe a little bit less. So I'm just like, yeah, I call. And like, yeah, I'm going to lose a lot and I'm going to feel stupid or whatever, but this just has to be a super overbluff spot. There's just no way that regs are controlling their bluff frequency here without finding tons of bluff raises on the turn. So unless they're really good at finding bluff raises on the turn, they're going to get to the river with too many raisable bluffing hands now. And that's the issue for them, I think. So we call. I only show you hands that I win because I'm a scammer, so I only want you to see the pots that I win. Obviously, I ran this hand 100 times and I lost 96 of them, and I wanted to show you the one of the 4 times that I won. That's what happened there. Just remember that. But let's find a losing hand. I'm sure we have one. Let's have a dig through this session and see if we can find a losing hand to appease those of you who like to see me suffer, because I know there's plenty of you out there. So guys, you can watch me suffer. We squeezed kings. We're going to get it in against the fish with pocket kings. What a glorious, amazing spot. What could possibly go wrong? 7s, huge favorite. Let's go. We're like 80-something%. Let's go. Boom. Look at the suffering. Look at the pain. See? I'm not good at poker after all. Couldn't even win this spot with pocket kings. There you go. Proof is in the pudding, as they say. Alright, on to more winning hands. Let's do 15 more winning hands now. Let's go. Okay, don't worry, Never Sacred 89. The fold you made on the river here was a very good one. And put your mind at ease if you're watching this. You played well. You did good. Attaboy. That was a bit patronising. I apologise. Okay, 1.5 VBs here into 4.5. Jack 8 of clubs. Big blind versus cutoff. Going to go ahead and make the call. Not much to say. Going to go ahead and check the turn. God, this is an exciting spot, huh? And if villain bets here, we have an easy call again. You can see how quickly I go to check this river, and there are two reasons for this. One, most of the hands that villain is going to call a bet with in this spot are going to be value bets. Just take a minute to unpack that statement. Most of the hands that villain will call a bet with in this spot are going to be value bets for villain anyway. So if you imagine I bet big here, what am I getting called by? A straight. Okay, that's going to value bet. Two pair. That's going to value bet. Ace king. That's going to value bet. Pocket aces with a club, that's going to value bet. So making a big bet, I don't feel that I ever really get called by a hand that doesn't just value bet anyway, unless villain is really versed in GTO and is finding like the right blocker bluff catchers with the 5x or the 9x or whatever they're supposed to call sometimes. Probably not 5x in the spot. That might not even be a bluff catcher. But yeah, the GTO opponent, when you look at the spot, solver versus solver, so you like load up your GTO wizard and you're like, I'm going to see what the GTO wizard says. And it's like, oh yeah, you should... You know, villain should call you with, let's say, ace 9 of diamonds, because that's, or ace 9 of hearts, right? That's exactly the right hand you should call the river with. It's probably not, by the way. Or 10-9, let's say, something like that. They should call it some frequency, let's say. That's probably not really happening. So humans are a bit more linear with what they call. So humans are way more likely to call an overbet here at these stakes with something like ace king than they are with something like 10-9 with a club. Even though 10-9 with a 10 of clubs is probably a way better bluff catcher than ace king. But that's just kind of the way people think about poker. So in this spot, in reality, when you go really big here, most of the hands that call you are decent, strong hands that are value betting themselves if you check. And that's a really powerful argument, actually, for just checking. Another powerful argument for checking, instead of betting small, is that you block the jack, and the jack of clubs is a hand that will call like a small bet here because it's a jack and it has a flush blocker and you're blocking the calling range. So when you're blocking the calling range, and this is a small point because we all know that blockers are really dumb and stupid and don't ever matter, but just to talk about them anyway, for the 2% or 3% EV that they preside over here, we're removing the middle of villain's range. That's what we call polarizing blockers. So villain's range is now being polarized by virtue of the fact that we take out a jack, which means that they now at a slightly higher frequency have a king plus, and at a slightly higher frequency have something like air, or something like a 5 that just probably isn't calling anyway. So yeah, I think going for a check here is really standard based on the primary thought that most of the hands that call a big bet anyway. So villain goes for 3.7. I would guess that this is like a bluff like pretty damn frequently, but it's going to be a decent spot for villain to bluff in. These bet check bet spots when the river is a king, these hit a lot of villain's range here. The king is definitely a reasonable card for the cutoff, and so this is a card that people are going to reopen as a bluff on really quite frequently, and they're going to have a credible value range here, and they've got lots of value combos, even though they check the turn. So not surprised to see a bet here at all. We're going to raise now, of course, against this sizing. The jack high flush is more than good enough to raise, so we go ahead and bump up to like 19 here. This isn't as big as it looks. The way to think about sizing in this spot, guys, is that when you call the 3.7, a new pot is born. So 3.7 plus 3.7 is what, 7.4? Add that to the 7.5, so it's 14.9. So if I was to put in 3.7 here, the pot's already 14.9, and then I only make it like another 16, 15 or so for villain. So this is basically a pot size raise. It's slightly over a pot size raise. It looks really big in multiples of X, but I need you guys, please, please, stop thinking about raising in multiples of X. It's not a good idea. Stop doing it. Think about pot instead. Percentage pot is the best metric here. I don't think we got coddled here. Pretty sure we just got a fold. I did think about it a little bit though, which made me think that Never Scared. Did I call him Never Sacred at the start? I guess he was scared here, but quite rightly so. But yeah, good fold. So if you're watching this, my friend, you're watching this over in Poland and you're like, I wonder if Pete Clark owned me and he's going to brag about it on YouTube. Like, I would brag about it if I'd owned you on YouTube, absolutely shamelessly, but no, in this case, you made a really good fold and you got the better of me, I guess. So yeah, well played. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you like this video, do smash the like button, do subscribe, it helps us grow, and check out carrotcorner.com for everything else from us. Also, let us know in the comments what kinds of videos you like the most and what ones you want to see in the near future. We'll be back very soon, and yeah, if it's getting to like Christmas time, yeah, I don't know if it is. I'm recording a few videos in advance, but have a great holiday and all of that as well, guys. I'll see you soon.